So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining our special event today in light of this year's World Mental Health Day. So, today we are discussing a really topical area of discussion. Has burnout culture led to the Great Resignation? So, I'm going to share a lot of context on this, and I'm delighted to be joined today by some wonderful speakers. We're starting off with Valerie, who's going to lead us into a beautiful guided mindfulness exercise today. We've also got three wonderful speakers who will be joining us for a panel discussion: Maria Kohut, Emma Harvey, and Tomo Kokona. And then we're also rounding off the event with a talk from Joe Kaplan at Outfly. So you're really in for a treat today. And I've so been looking forward to this event. So it's just wonderful to be here. You know, when you've just been building up to a moment you just can't wait for. So it's a really special time of year. Mental health wise, this is a really big date on the mental health calendar, World Mental Health Day, which took place on the 10th of October yesterday. And the theme that the Mental Health Foundation have set this year for World Mental Health Day is mental health in an unequal world. So there's a lot to be covered in that area, and today we're going to be focusing on workplace well-being and burnout prevention specifically. So without further ado, I'm going to invite the lovely Valerie Tay to the virtual stage. Valerie is a phenomenal well-being and self-care practitioner. She is also part of the Karma team, our client manager and a well-being facilitator. We're very proud to have her on our team. And those of you who regularly join our monthly events will know that Valerie and I typically tend to lead these events, and often we invite guest speakers to join us too. So I'm going to bring Valerie to the virtual stage. Okay. Hello, Val. Hi.
Good morning, good evening to everyone who's dialing in. Thanks so much, Tanya.
Pleasure. Thank you for being here, Val. I'm going to just change the settings so you're spotlighted, and over to you to lead our opening exercise today. Thank you for being here, Val.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me today, and welcome everyone. So lovely to see multiple continents joining us today for our special event following World Mental Health Day yesterday. So I'd like to begin our time together today by inviting you to find a comfortable seat. Also trying to find a position where the soles of your feet can connect with the ground underneath you. Just taking a moment to connect your feet to the ground, your sitting bones to the chair or sofa beneath you. Finding a neutral spine with your head on top of your heart and your heart on top of your hips. And just starting to check in with your body, noticing if there's any part of you that feels a little bit tight, a little bit tense. Maybe you want to invite yourself into some sort of a stretch or gentle movement, just to ease into your body a little bit more. You can either take your gaze above the screen into the distance, or you might close down the eyes gently and just start to tune in to the present moment, tune into all that is here for you without any judgment or expectations. And then noticing your breath. Notice if it is going slowly or quickly, if it's deep or shallow. Notice if you're breathing just into your throat, or if you can feel some movement in your chest, or if you can notice your belly moving. And when you're ready, I invite you to bring your attention down to the soles of your feet. That'd be nice to just shift the weight into your heels and lift the toes up. Give the toes a big stretch and then gently place the fronts of your feet down onto the ground as well. And starting from your feet, and just start to notice what is there. Notice what it feels like to push the soles of your feet onto the ground. Notice the support you receive from the ground. Then start to bring your awareness slowly up the legs, scanning for any parts of tension or tightness. And keep shifting that awareness up the body, maybe into your hips, into your belly. And keep working your way up the front line of the chest, the muscles around your back. Noticing if your fingers, wrists, or arms feel tight or heavy. And just keep scanning up, moving up maybe to the space of our chest and heart. Notice how that feels. Coming up towards your shoulders, notice if there's any tightness or tension there. And keep following your sensations in the body as you scan up towards your throat, your jaw, your face, your eyes, all the way up to the crown of your head. Embracing all that is present, acknowledging your current state. Now, just to bring a little bit of extra tension release, I'd like to invite you to follow the cues I'm about to share. So beginning by bringing your eyebrows together, starting to bring a bit of tension to your jaw, to your neck, maybe rising the shoulders to your ears. Breathe in as you actively invite some tightness and tension into this part of yourself. Just hold the breath there, follow that tension for a few seconds. And then we're all going to exhale and soften, releasing any tension or tightness that you've consciously built until you feel your body return to a state of softness. Moving to the middle section of our body next. This time I invite you, as you breathe in, to squeeze your tummy in, to squeeze your bum, to squeeze your thighs, and just build some tension in this middle section of your body. Again, it may be a little bit uncomfortable, but we're trying to actively feel tight and tense. Maybe bringing your fingers into a fist for these final few moments here. And then you're going to breathe out and allow any tension or tightness to melt away from your torso, from the tops of your legs, from your arms. And finally, moving your awareness to the lower half of your body. You're going to point the toes, squeeze the kneecaps, tense the shins. As you breathe in, feel some tightness brewing in this lower part of yourself. Notice what this feels like. Breathing in, just holding here for a few more moments. And exhale, release. Just allow all that tension, all that tightness to melt away. And hopefully you feel a little bit more open, a little bit softer than a few moments ago. If your eyes were closed, taking a moment to blink them back open as you welcome yourself into this space, landing in the present, ready for this panel discussion that's about to take place. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today.
Thank you so much, Val. That was just beautiful. You're getting some love in the comments already from Ben. Thank you, Ben. Okay, here we are. So thank you so much, and appreciate you being here with us to help us get into a centered space before entering into this panel discussion today. How else can people get in touch with you, Val? Is there anything that you can share? Because I know you're also doing a wonderful mental health based talk later on.
I can pop my email in the chat box. Thank you so much, Tanya. And it is really a pleasure to be invited here to share a grounding before our panel discussion. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thank you for being here. Okay. Wasn't that just beautiful, and just such a helpful reminder to us all of the small things that can make such a valuable difference in our overall health and well-being at any given time that we can tap into as and when we need. So Valerie and I regularly do these monthly workshops for Karma for our communities, to provide actionable strategies that you can take on board to support your mental health and well-being in work and in all aspects of your lives. So thank you, Valerie, again for that. And I'm so excited to be starting this really important panel discussion we're about to begin. Before we do, I'm just going to give you all a little bit of context into the sort of inspiration behind this event, really. So the pandemic, I'm sure we're all well versed in hearing many different perspectives of the impact of the pandemic on people's lives over the last 18 months. And what really struck me and the team at Karma was this study by Personio that came out recently to identify the post-pandemic talent drain, they call it. And basically that the outcome of the pandemic has shifted a lot of people's perspectives and actually caused people to really reevaluate and reflect on how they value their jobs, what's most important in their life, what is most meaningful in their lives. So to give you a wider context of this, and what we're discussing today is the impact of burnout, specifically on this impact of people, reflecting on their lives, and ultimately a lot of people now leaving their jobs as a result of that reevaluation. So we will be identifying the role of burnout within that, but also having a wider discussion as to why this is really. And it was so fascinating to look at this research. So I'm going to just read a couple of excerpts from this study and then bring the experts onto the screen. See what I did there? So just to give you a bit of context about this. So over the past year, a lot of businesses have been in crisis mode. For some, the focus on firefighting has caused other areas such as their people strategy to fall by the wayside. But negligence, as they call it, comes at a cost. Businesses that haven't prioritized their people during the pandemic could be sleepwalking towards a talent exodus, damaged by employer brand and a productivity drought. And the detrimental impact this will inevitably have on business performance won't become apparent until it's too late. So to explore the cost of poor people strategy during the pandemic, Personio surveyed 500 HR decision makers and 2,000 employees in the UK and Ireland and conducted economic analysis based on their findings and other publicly available information. They considered productivity losses, staff attrition, and the impact of these on business performance, demonstrating the value of a strategic HR function in boosting a business's bottom line and in turn the economy. So a few top line stats that came from this study. The overall potential cost of a potential talent exodus in the next 12 months, they estimate is over 16 billion. And the total cost of the pandemic productivity drought in the UK and Ireland alone is over 8 billion. And 39% of HR decision makers don't cite people strategy as a top priority in their business. Very fascinating outcome from this study, which we will delve into deeper shortly. A few other statistics that came out highlight, which we promoted as part of this event, that 38% of employees are looking to change roles in the next 6 or 12 months or once the economy has strengthened. 45% of HR decision makers are worried that employees will leave once the job market improves. And finally, 26% of HR decision makers say that talent retention is an organizational priority. So lots to digest right there. So I'll let that just marinate with you a moment as I bring on board our wonderful speakers for today. Okay, join me on the virtual stage. Tomor, Maria, and Emma. Hello, hello. Hey. Let's make sure we're all off mute so we can hear one another. Kerry, yes, I will post the link to the study right now so you can all take a look as well. I'll do this at the end when we culminate, and we'll be sharing other information as well. So we'll have a discussion about this first, and then I will post it at the end, definitely. Thank you, Kerry. So hello and welcome, all of you. Thank you so much for being here today. You are all such inspirational people in the fields of mental health and business development, so it's really a joy to have you. So I'm just going to do a very brief introduction for each of these wonderful people, and I'll pass it over to you all to do a wider introduction for yourselves. So the lovely Maria is an insatiably curious soul, particularly fascinated by mysterious workings of the human brain, medical history, and our relationship with our own bodies, both during and after life. As a feature editor for Medical News Today, Maria is passionate about investigating and shining a light on health and well-being at work, with previous experience as a teacher, academic ambassador, and freelance writer. We have Tomor here, who is a London-based performing arts business consultant, coach and mentor, helping creative leaders to unlock growth, fulfill potential and realize business dreams to become the spotlight in their fields. Through face-to-face, online, one-to-one and group coaching, alongside public speaking and symposiums, Tomor has inspired positive change for thousands of people worldwide. And finally, Emma. The lovely Emma is a published author, board advisor, and the founder of Candid HR. After working for 20 years as a HR professional for a large blue chip businesses, Emma wanted to offer similar services and levels of support to the SME market, and as such, Candid HR was born. Emma offers extensive expertise in the field of HR and has supported hundreds of businesses to date. So thank you all so much. I'm going to hand over to each of you, Maria, Tomor, and then Emma. Just give a little bit more of an introduction and why you were interested in joining this discussion today.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Tanya. Thank you so much for having me today. Really excited about this event. So I'm Maria. I work as a feature editor for Medical News Today, which is a health and medical science website. I've been with MNT for a little over 4 years now. And as you mentioned, Tanya, I have a lot of interests, but I'm particularly interested in mental health, and I think particularly in the notion of burnout and why it happens and how you can prevent it, because it's a phenomenon that I think affects so many people and has definitely affected me in the past as well. And so I've been looking into it, talking to a lot of mental health advocates, including yourself, about burnout in the past, but also to people who've experienced it. And it's definitely something that's taken hold a lot more during the pandemic, I think. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you here today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Maria. And yes, I've had the pleasure of working with all these wonderful people in different capacities, and had the pleasure of co-writing and contributing to Medical News Today articles led by Maria. So thank you very much for your interest in joining us today. Tomor is also a longtime mentor of mine, and Emma has also collaborated with us at Karma and supported us with HR functions. So you're in really good hands today, everyone. Trust me. So over to you, Tomor.
Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be here. Thank you, Tanya, for inviting me. I am talking today. I've been traveling in the last couple of weeks between Italy. Well, I'm based in London, but I've been traveling between Italy, Albania, and Kosovo. So my job has taken me to different places, different mentalities and ways of thinking. But what I've noticed commonly in these countries is that entrepreneurs and people are really bubbling. There is a momentum now that obviously we all have gone through this pandemic. And as Tanya has got the title of this event, the big escape, I think I call it the big revival, and I can feel this energy absolutely bubbling. So why am I here? I'm here because this is part of my life mission. I am all to do with empowering people, giving them a chance. Personally, I'm a choreographer by profession and a theater and film director. But the art has given me the chance to really get inside the psyche and also human behavior. mental health and being well mentally as well as physically is also a very important part of my life. I've gone through loads of trials and tribulations. I've gone through loads of experiences. And most importantly, these experiences have taught me to really pass on the knowledge and the support needed for the people who are creating and setting up their businesses, and also for entrepreneurs. So therefore, I think we are at the cusp of a big wave where we all would really, if we have the desire, we can really jump on it and just glide with this wave. So looking forward to the conversation later on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tomor. And last but not least, Emma.
Yeah, thank you guys, and thanks for again for the invitation to be here today, Tanya. Really appreciate it. So yeah, we as a business cover all things HR, and it's a bit of a broad church. That's from attracting people and retaining good people when we find them, as well as all things compliance, contract policies, procedures, that sort of thing. But I'm delighted to be here today because the challenge of people leaving because of reasons relating to burnout and not feeling valued is real. We'll see from this, and we've seen from the stats that Tanya quoted, that people are leaving jobs and sectors in their droves. So business owners need to get more creative in attracting and retaining good people. So I'm particularly interested in the debate today because mental health and well-being has a huge part to play in talent attraction and retention, which is proving a great challenge for a lot of our clients. And there's things that we can do to improve that and things that we can do differently.
Fabulous. I'm so excited for this discussion with you all. Thank you, Emma. And just before we get started, for those of you who are joining today who have never been to a Karma workshop before and are thinking, who is this woman who's hosting this panel? What credentials does she have? Just a very brief overview. So I'm the founder and director of Karma. We're an award-winning mental health and wellbeing training organisation based in the UK, but supporting clients globally. We exist to empower entrepreneurs, freelancers and business teams to nurture good mental health and wellbeing. And we do this primarily through workplace training courses, events, webinars like this, and digital products as well. And to date, we've trained over 300 organizations. So we're really passionate about this topic, especially with relation to burnout, because our core focus is on looking at how we actually prevent burnout from escalating and help people to nurture and look after their mental health in their work and all aspects of their lives. So that's just a brief overview of myself. So without further ado, we'll get started on the first question, which is to you all. So I would love to know, in your opinion, given your respective fields, what trends have you noticed throughout the pandemic that you feel has potentially led to what has now been dubbed the Great Resignation within companies? And do you see burnout as a feature in this? Who would like to go first?
I'll jump in.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I think there's been a definite shift in the pandemic. I think the business owners largely spent the first year of this trying to figure out how to prevent mass redundancies, layoffs and restructuring, to seeing people leaving the jobs and sectors in droves. And we've seen a couple of stats already, but the most popular stat that I see through all press at the minute is that Microsoft did a survey of 30,000 global workers and showing that 41% were thinking of quitting or changing professions. So people have definitely reprioritized, and we can see on the ground that the challenge of that is very real for business owners. And I think we've seen a lot of people move to hybrid or flexible working models through necessity rather than desire. And guess what? We can trust people to get on with it and do things differently and work from home. And those sectors that have been able to offer hybrid working have seen greater levels of retention, but we know it's not always that easy depending on what sector you're working in. So those in office roles have seen that they no longer need to decide between work-life balance. If you can do your job from home, walk the dog, pick the kids up and still get things done, then there's no longer any need to feel compromised in this respect. But burnout has definitely had a part to play in people wanting something different. And I do think that people are looking for new opportunities on this basis alone.
If it's okay, I'll just jump in as well, because Emma mentioned the work-life balance and the importance of being able to work from home and being able to do all of the things that you need to do without worrying, when am I gonna be able to go and pick up the kids from school and so on and so forth. So I can only speak from my experience as a journalist, having interviewed a lot of people about how they were affected by the pandemic, how their work-life balance was affected by the pandemic. And what I can tell you that I've seen, which is probably going to speak to both Emma and Toma a lot, is that while some people were happy to be able to work from home, especially in the beginning, what with the lockdowns that we've had here in the UK and elsewhere as well. There was often also a sense of overwork. People didn't really know when to stop working, or because they were at home all the time. I guess, at least in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a sense that they had to be always on, to always be available, to reply to emails and reply to online messages from colleagues and managers and collaborators, which I think, from what I've heard from people, got to be quite a lot. And I did actually get a lot of questions from readers asking, how do I reestablish that work-life balance when I'm at home with my children and my partner and my pets all day, every day, and we're all sharing the same space, and I have to look after them as well. So that was definitely a question that I've asked other people as well. And maybe we can discuss it today.
Definitely. Thank you, Maria. Tamor, what about you?
Absolutely. I agree with the two previous speakers. It has been a very challenging situation for all of us. Most of my clients are people in the performing arts, in the arts industry. And in the arts industry, we've seen this huge contrast. In 2019, the creative industries in the UK alone generated 111 billion pounds, which is something like 140, 150 billion dollars. So it showed a huge industry. And yet, within the pandemic, everything just shut down. We have theaters, venues, public spaces completely closed. And there's an army behind it. And you can imagine families behind it and so on. So that's not only affected the people on their economical side, their profession, but also psychologically, emotionally. They found out that suddenly dancers or circus people or singers who fed themselves in a way emotionally through the communication with the public, suddenly they found themselves locked into their apartments. A university lecturer in New York, who's a friend of mine, literally said for the first 2 months, he couldn't really find himself because he was in that situation where he emotionally and professionally felt that he needed to have that interaction with the audience. And yet the other contrast, the other extreme, is the explosion of the Zoom and the explosion of other creative means such as Netflix. Everybody went, so artists who were previously adapted to provide their services and build their businesses through face-to-face or group performances found alternatives. So I think there's an alternative, there's a way where you can see both of the sides of the coin. So I think we've got loads to talk about today and to share experiences. I've got a few case studies. So I'm waiting for Tanya to, get on and to tell us what to say, how to say it.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for setting the tone. And I suppose given all of your answers, it stands to reason that burnout may very well have been partly to do with the outcome of what we've just started discussing now. And Emma, that's a fascinating study that you shared from Microsoft as well. So if we think about the features associated with burnout, it does include things like disconnection with work, disengagement with work or others around us, feeling fatigued, exhausted, and many other symptoms as well. So I'm going to direct a question to each of you individually now. Starting with Emma. So in your experience of running your own HR business, you've started talking about trends that you've seen throughout the pandemic. So if there's anything else that you want to share, please do. And also about those sectors such as retail, hospitality, manufacturing, where it's not as easy to allow working from home. What can those businesses do to enhance sort of work-life balance and well-being?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think it's difficult because people need to be present in those workplaces for them to function. So that's the dilemma really right there. But I read a great quote about this the other day. I think it was in a Forbes article, and it's really about humanizing work. So a lot of employees are asking, how has this company that I've given a lot to over the years looked after me, my well-being, and my happiness during this very difficult time? And if employers have been negligent in this respect, then I think people will go somewhere else where they feel more valued and more connected to the company's values. So we understand that working from home is easier in some sectors than others, but we can still be flexible even if that can't happen. And there is an argument to say being in work provides an element of social well-being. So finding a balance is a good thing. And I think as a very minimum, no matter what sector you're in and no matter what industry you're working, as a minimum, employees need to feel that they can come to their managers and ask for things like time off for hospital appointments, emergency childcare, or flexible working arrangements. And you'd be surprised how many people still face difficulties in these areas, which are just basic, really. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to work from home, but it can include things like flexible start and finish times, split shifts, a review of core hours. But the key to success with anything, no matter what business you're in, is communication and trying to foster an open culture where at least employees feel that it's okay for these questions to be asked, or better still, be proactive and go to your employees with these types of solutions.
Absolutely, well said, Emma. Thank you so much. And also, sort of as an offshoot from that, what would you say employers really need to be focusing on and implementing in their organisations moving forward to ensure employee well-being?
Yeah, so it's I mean, it's probably a webinar on its own, very question, but I think our top tip, number one tip is if you're going to embrace well-being as an employer, then do it well. It's not enough to have a tick box policy to offer free fruit on Fridays or throw gym membership in and think you're done. The most proactive businesses, I think, are putting well-being at the heart of what they do so that it permeates the culture, which in turn has an impact on the 3 R's, which is recruitment, retention, and reputation. And I think people want to know as human beings that the company values are aligned to their own. So the way that employers can influence this is to think about well-being holistically, how we can best support our employees' physical, mental, social, and financial well-being, and how do we make coming to work a great place to be where people feel valued. And I think above that, it's about sort of creating a compelling internal brand that people are proud of, that they want to extol and they want to share with their friends and family. If we can do that through great communication, then I think we're halfway there.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes such logical sense, doesn't it, that people are what build the business. So it does make sense to invest in your people. But it is fascinating to discover, just how many organizations aren't necessarily putting that, as you said, at the heart of the business. And it makes absolute sense as to why that should be from what you said. Thank you so much, Emma. Really inspiring. I've just seen a couple of questions come through from Veronique, and I meant to mention this earlier to you all. We're absolutely going to be doing a Q&A function from today's panel. So do feel free to pop them in the Q&A if that helps you as we go along, or if you just want to make a note of it and then ask it at the end, but we will definitely come back to those questions. So thank you, Veronique. We'll definitely answer your question at the end of our discussion shortly. All right, thank you. So I'm going to go on to the next question for Maria. So Maria, as a feature editor for Medical News Today, you've written a wide breadth of articles throughout the pandemic covering all sorts of topics such as burnout, managing a work-life balance, access to healthcare, how mental health has affected those who identify as LGBTIQ+, to name a few. You've even put call-outs for the public to share their stories and comment on their experiences throughout the pandemic, which you've integrated within your feature pieces. So what has it been like to cover such wide-ranging stories, and through the interviews you've conducted, how do you think people are managing when it comes to balancing their work and other aspects of their lives?
Thank you. Honestly, it's very hard to even know where to start because people have generously shared so much with me, especially in the start of the pandemic when I put out a call for contributions asking everybody from around the world, how they'd been affected by the pandemic and by various lockdowns and restrictive measures, I had so many answers, so many replies from people who just felt like they wanted to be heard, I think. That it was very difficult to even keep up with the wealth of responses and to integrate them in a single feature. So initially, I was going to just write one feature about the impact of the pandemic, but I ended up writing a series of features. That's how many people actually responded to me. And so I mentioned before that a lot of people talked about finding it very difficult to keep that work-life balance because they had been working in an office before. And you know how it is when you're actually going to work, maybe there's a bit of a commute at the start and at the end of the day, and then you get to chat with people when you're at work. So it's not all constantly sitting down and working and being focused. Whereas I think a lot of people who hadn't necessarily worked from home before and were thrown into this constant work from home situation struggled to maintain that balance and felt that they had to prove, you know, what Emma was saying, that they had to prove that they were actually doing their work by being constantly connected. And that was very tough for them. And that's something that I heard a lot. But then Tomer mentioned that he worked with people in the arts a lot. And I also heard, you know, people in the arts losing their jobs or losing their opportunities, or people who are working freelance or working in hospitality, again, losing their jobs or losing job opportunities because of the pandemic. And the situation has somewhat redressed now. But I guess when the pandemic started, we kept hearing, I guess, in the media and from other sources as well, stuff like, so what are you going to do with all your free time? What skills are you going to pick up? What are you going to learn? What languages are you going to learn? How's your garden going to improve? And really what I've actually seen in talking to people throughout the pandemic was that where they weren't struggling to keep up this balance between the work that they had in the workplace and the work that they had at home with children and other people that they were maybe caring for, if they'd lost a job, they were constantly, you know, struggling to stay afloat financially and find new job opportunities. So in that sense, there was definitely burnout happening. And I think even though things are improving a bit now in the UK and elsewhere, because things are opening up, there are more job opportunities happening, there's definitely a backlash from having been in a place where people were struggling to stay afloat. Well, I'm sorry, what was the second half of your question? How people are managing? I think from what I've heard, they managed by staying connected with others, you know, with work colleagues, if they had work colleagues, with family members, with friends in any way that they could. But that's also had, you know, its own set of problems because most of the time this was online. And even now, for some people who maybe are still at high risk of COVID, even despite the vaccinations, it might still all be or primarily be online, this keeping in touch. And that in itself, you know, we've heard about Zoom fatigue. So it's all contributed to a sense of overwhelm from what I've seen. And that is something that maybe businesses need to learn how to deal with. And possibly also individuals learning how to make that space in their lives where they take a break and look after themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Maria. And we've also just had a comment from Claire in the comments box that burnout isn't just overwork, it can be emotional burnout from trying to process so many thoughts and feelings. So that kind of complements what you were just saying there about overwhelm.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing that I actually heard from readers that got in touch with me was that the sense of anxiety because of the pandemic, being worried about getting ill or having lost loved ones to COVID-19 or because of COVID-19 in indirect ways, and just the overwhelm of having to keep track of things all the time, you know, that emotional labor that we have to put in every day. That this sense of anxiety and this pressure actually made them feel like they couldn't focus on work that well. So yeah, I totally agree. It's not just about having to work to put in the work, but it's also the emotional labor.
Absolutely, and there's so much to be said for that. Why employers need to focus on this and for it to be a priority in how their staff are feeling and doing, because if you're not able to feel at your best for yourself, you're not able to feel at your best for others around you and for your work, it can have an impact on the quality and the output of your work, because we are human at the end of the day. We're not just robots turning up to a job and like machines just getting it done mechanically, and that's it. Like, we have feelings, we have emotions, we have personal lives outside of what we're doing for our work. So the more that it can feel like that is valued and acknowledged and appreciated by employers, then the more that can boost what both you and Emma have highlighted about the sense of positive culture in workplaces and inclusive culture. Thank you, Maria, so much for sharing that perspective. So on to my next question for Tomor. So let's talk about the solo workers. We've covered a lot around people who work within business team and businesses and employers and what they need to be doing. And I'm really interested to explore this area around entrepreneurs, freelancers, how they've been affected by the pandemic. Now, just to start with, I just want to give a bit of context, because I found some really interesting studies around this area online as well. The IPSC Self-Employed Landscape Report cites that the number of solo self-employed in the UK, excluding those who have others working for them, has fallen by 5% from 4.6 million in 2019 to 4.4 million in 2020. And this is a sharp drop for a sector that grew continuously between 2008 and 2019 by a total of 40%. The financial hit has also led to an enormous increase in solo self-employed people accessing the benefit system. So people who are working for themselves up to the pandemic, a large number of people really did struggle. On the flip side of that, linked to what you were saying earlier, Tomor, about this buzz that's also being felt, studies cited by Salesforce show that globally, entrepreneurs have started businesses in record numbers during the pandemic, and economists speculate a combination of accessible technologies, home confinement, and spare time that they have been perhaps the catalyst for this. So it's a really interesting area to dissect, like how it has impacted people who were and have been self-employed for a while, and the fact that actually the pandemic has given lots of people who may be leaving their jobs or realigning their purpose in a different way to actually start new businesses. So as you and I know, Tomor, it takes a great deal of strength, courage, and tenacity to launch and run your own enterprise, and it does come with a lot of pressure. So as a coach, a leader, and an expert in the business of building sustainable businesses, what have you noticed over the past 18 months in those that you've worked with who are self-employed or running their own businesses? Do you think that there's been an increase in burnout, and have people even been resigning from their own businesses because they've struggled to cope?
Yeah, it's true. Actually, entrepreneurs, in a way, are the fuel of the society, because quite a lot of inventions have started by entrepreneurs like Zuckerberg and other people. And yet, until they become these big major companies, they were just a guy in their garage building and creating something. And that brings in the stress and the pain of growth of a startup company. It is well known in different countries, but if we mention statistics in the UK, in a normal time, roughly about 70% of new businesses fall within the first 3 years. So that the rates, it's just enormous. The falling rate is really, really high. And yet, entrepreneurs were hit by the pandemic. So this is the first impression. A lot of them found out that they had invested a lot in their own business, and that overnight disappeared for some of them. At the same time, some of them went to the government to ask for support. Some did get it, but quite a lot of them. And if you remember last year, about 6.5 million self-employed people did not initially get the support from the government. And in fact, were the last group of people in the UK to get the help from the government, which it did arrive. And yet, if you count the other costs, human cost, emotional cost, forget about financial costs, but family, relationship costs and so on. It was enormous. If you see it in that perspective, it looks as if it was just doom. And yet, on the other perspective, that's why entrepreneurs are who they are. There are people who are restless. There are people who got an idea, they can't sleep at night until they make this idea come into fruition. There are people who drive people around their cause. There are people who bring people in. If you see these two elements, and if we bring it into our today's topic, inevitably, as you, Tanya, mentioned, it adds on stress on top of stress. So therefore, based on what I've talked and what I've seen and what I read, with a lot of entrepreneurs found themselves into this double and triple burden out of their situation. So we had people who were actually suffering from nervous breakdown. We did have people, a couple of people actually found themselves falling into depression, fall into despair in some cases. I can mention here one of the cases where a theatre director had a group of staff. Her yearly turnover was about a little bit over 10 million pounds, which is about $12 million per year. And she felt under the pressure because she wanted to continue, and yet she had to furlough some of her staff. She didn't have the money for all of her staff. So obviously, being an entrepreneur herself, she found ways around and obviously invited a consultant, a coach, and together we built a strategy. And the strategy was exactly built on what Maria mentioned before. And what also Emma mentioned, bringing people in. So instead of them feeling, oh my goodness, I can't really tell people that I haven't got enough money, I can't really tell people that I'm just losing it, we found a methodology or method, we built a method on how to bring people in. Mostly they were freelancers who worked in the theatre. So then we brought the community, brought the groups in, and started building online services. So the Pottery Club started creating their plasticine and other creative artwork. They built an online shop, and all of the proceeds went to support the artists and went to support the theatre. So what does this story tell us? It tells that out of that adversity, a new wave of creativity started. But within the possibilities that they created, they also started to pick up from where they left, started supporting each other, started talking about their family issues, because some of them were living with partners, some of them who were just the whole time traveling, and they had to spend more time in their families, found this amazing opportunity to be in families. But others, and we had a few cases where we had domestic violence issues, we had kids being all the time at home. So all of this suddenly started flourishing in a good way, but also in a bad way. And I think another thing that entrepreneurs are really good at is spotting opportunities, spotting new opportunities. It's too early now to tell that, if it has been 5% of the entrepreneurs or freelancers or small companies pulling off and just going into the employment field and so on. But I can really tell, and you can tell that I'm always focusing to the positive side of it. I can really tell that there's a buzz going on where the opportunities are really grasped. For example, we had one of my clients, the Stars Academy. They tried to bring on online music teaching in 2019. So they had a large group of about 300 students, and they sent the idea, they invested money in 2019, they took the risk to build a platform online, and none of the parents wanted it. Nobody would. Like, what? We're not going to really have my child doing a piano or violin lesson through a small mobile phone. So the investment almost went out. And yet with the pandemic, everybody were locked in. And the parents, most of the parents were just sending feedback saying, oh my goodness, my child, my little 7 years old daughter can't wait for the piano lesson to come in, because that not only brings joy to her, but also to the family, is the only sense of normalities that we have. So needless to say, as as Emma was saying before, the hybrid system for this company, for this young entrepreneur, really flourished, because now they have face-to-face lessons, but also online lessons, and also has brought another idea where they can go internationally. So they are actually building their business internationally. So the future for that type of business is really bright.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tomor. And actually, that's a really important point as well to hone in on, the idea of, the hybrid model of working that many businesses are looking at adopting moving forward. So I think that there's a lot to be said for what you've all shared so far, in the sense that there are elements that link to the reality that burnout could be a feature, based on a lot of the responses that you've shared, and overworking, overwhelm, exhaustion, etc., from personal circumstances interplaying with people's work lives, and whether people's strategy is a priority within businesses. But also, Emma, actually, when you did your LinkedIn post about this last week promoting the event, thank you very much, I noticed a whole string of comments, which was wonderful to see, and a lot of engagement. And one thing really stood out to me, which I think also is an interesting point to what you're saying, Tomor, around the positives element as well. And Maria, I know that you've also said that, with your stories, when you did call out stories, a lot of people would talk about, the elements of the pandemic that gave them like space for reflection and this kind of thing, and time with family, etc. But one comment on Emma's post was very simple, but is it burnout or is it people reprioritizing? And I think there's an element of that. It really depends. We're not here saying everyone's burnt out, but we can't deny that burnout is a feature, and it has played a feature in this pandemic. So I think it's also interesting to look at the idea of that shift, and maybe there is a positive element that's come up for some people, and it's given them that chance to look at what's actually really important for me, which is, and going on to my final question for you all before we open up for Q&A. So what actionable tips would you recommend to people navigating burnout, perhaps, or just that reprioritizing, so that they can realign towards their true purpose? What tips would you give people who are navigating that right now? Tomo, do you want to start this one?
Yes. Well, I will still stay on the field of freelancers and entrepreneurs, because I think that's an area where I have the expertise about. Number one, go back into what made you come into this field. What does really drive you? Why do you wake up in the morning? There would be moments when you will see things, not really being realized. And yet, if you go back and say, why am I doing this? What drives me? If you are in the field of constructions, if you're in the field of education, if you're in the field of helping other people, that's going to keep you going. Number two, make sure that now is the moment when you communicate, you contact people. This is the time when you pick up the phone. There's a rule that I use it quite often. Every day I pick up the phone and I talk to 3 people. That's it. As far as I do that, then I feel that a big positive part of my life has gone by. Why do we need to contact people, communicate with people? Because by having other people's energy, by having other people coming around, one conversation, one idea, one concept will bring you to another. Number 3, be honest with the right people. Okay, honestly is something that would really help you. And I'm saying this mostly for men. Being a man myself, I used to find it very difficult to really show my feelings. I used to find it very difficult to really show that I was vulnerable, that I didn't have the answers, that I didn't have to really be all bravado out there. So, however, that's with a pinch of caution. You do not have to be honest and open with everyone. Why? Because this leads to the next point, the next tip I would give you. Try to be careful who you surround yourself with, because you could try to be honest and to talk about your things, and yet without you knowing other people's energy, it's enough to really lower your drive. I'll give you a very simple example. I was talking to the head of a big national performing arts school. We're talking here one of the best in Europe. But because of some things, we sat down for lunch. Her husband came in, and he's an air controller, so he controls the flights coming in and out of the country. So she was talking about some stuff, and him being one of these really focused people, suddenly he turned around to her and he said, "Do you realize," he said, "that within the last 15 minutes, you've been talking to Tomor, and you've only been talking about what things didn't work?" So be very careful who you surround yourself with. And I'm not saying to let people down. I'm not saying to really alienate people, but try to keep that. Another thing that I would very much give it as a tip is this is the time when, as an entrepreneur, as someone who goes through life taking risks, to think about calculated risks. Everybody wants to really go out there, calculate the risks really well, plan. Of course, we have now a container which costs $2,000, now is minimum $12,000. So you need to calculate these risks. But the last tip I will give you is this: please stay within the spirit of being an entrepreneur. That's it. Don't chicken out. Be you. Go out there and just do it.
Be yourself, everyone else has already taken, as Oscar Wilde says, right? It's one of my favorite quotes. Thank you so much, Tomor. Really valuable advice there, and great engaged conversation happening with Gilo, Valerie, Mish. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Maria, what about you?
So I'm actually really glad that Tomo mentioned communication and honesty, because these are the first 2 points on my list as well. So something that I would advise people who have been through burnout, maybe because I've seen the discussion around, is it burnout or is it reprioritizing? And I don't think those two stand in opposition to each other. I think sometimes, burnout can lead to reprioritizing and reevaluating your values and what you want to work for. So I would say definitely, where possible, talk honestly to people. If you're working, with colleagues in a online or now in-person work environment, talk honestly to them about what you're going through, and you might see that you're not alone in your experiences. And I would say the same thing at home. With partners or family, be honest about what you can take on and what you're unable to take on, and go through that maybe negotiation process. But also encourage other people to speak honestly, especially in the workplace, and make space for other people to talk about themselves and what they're going through. Because, the reason why I mentioned talk honestly where possible about what you're going through is because during the pandemic, interviewing people and interviewing researchers, I heard a lot about people being stuck in, abusive environments, in abusive relationships, whether this was with a partner or whether they were someone who was part of the LGBTQIA plus community and they were suddenly, facing a homophobic environment, or an environment where they couldn't express themselves and be authentic. So I think that's why it's important for us to make space for others as well, and hear them out and see if we can help them out. And to make the space for mental health discussions in the workplace that will show just how important it is to have mental health resources available for people. And I'm not just talking signing them up to a mental health app, but actually asking people, what is it that you need in your life to improve your mental health? Because that's what's going to improve their output as well. Another thing that I would suggest is, and this is based both on my experience and on what I've learned from various courses that I've been to for journalists facing burnout, is to make space for yourself and make space for breaks. Because, in my work as a journalist, especially throughout the pandemic, you have to essentially be on all the time. And we know that there's such a thing as news anxiety from the overload of facing the news, especially when the news is not positive or when it's a bit uncertain and you don't know how things are going to work out. And it can be especially difficult in some jobs, such as journalism, to take that space. But it's important to allow yourself to take a break. It's important to allow yourself to say no to tasks, whether that's at home or if it's in the workplace, which can be, I acknowledge, much easier said than done, because people can be afraid about losing lucrative opportunities, especially if they're working freelance and if they're doing their own thing, having their own gig. They might be afraid of losing clients if they take that step back, or they might be scared of retribution, let's say from a manager. But it's important to think that if your mental and physical health aren't great, you won't really be able to do that work that you want to do. So I'm going to actually share a tip that I got from a life coach about saying no to people in the workplace. I found this really useful. Sometimes it's not really about saying no. It's not about, that you can't do something. Sometimes it's about saying and acknowledging that you can't take on a specific task at a specific moment because there's too much on your plate, and mentioning that honestly, just saying, I can't do this now within this time frame, but I can do this within a different time frame. And also being honest with people about what resources you need to accomplish a task, because sometimes that task may be unachievable because you don't have enough space, time, people to work with, I don't know, financial resources, other types of resources. So what Tomer was saying, being brave and honest and saying these things might help you deal with burnout and prevent burnout in the first place. But it might also help an employer or even a life partner understand what it is that you need in terms of doing the things that you need to do. So yeah, prioritize staying healthy, eating well. Your health is super important. And I think people often forget that sometimes the small things in life in terms of prioritizing health really do matter.
Such golden nuggets of advice there. Thank you so much, Maria. And you've got some really some comments that are really resonating in the chat box as well, especially around that, the idea that burnout can lead to reprioritizing, or, can be a catalyst, not necessarily just one or the other. And obviously Mish saying now as well, self-care is essential, can no longer keep going without resting points, being mindful and giving the self what we need when giving a service. If technology needs to plug in to recharge, we can definitely do the same. So thank you all for your comments. It's really great. And finally, Emma, what are your thoughts on helping others, like for tips for realigning towards your true purpose? And I would also give you just one more add-on to that, if that's okay. Just for people who might be, and this kind of links to Veronique's question, which we'll be coming on to shortly, around working in what they feel is a toxic environment. Like it's all well and good to say the things that you can do for yourself, but if you really don't feel that you're getting the support that you need where you're working and you're debating what to do, also that element of, how do you realign?
Yeah, it's easier said than done, I think, sometimes. But just to reiterate what Toma and Maria said, I think step one is talk it through with a trusted person, a friend, a relative, a counsellor, a colleague, someone who's got your back, who you can trust and who will totally listen for understanding would be step one. And then I think once you've done that, you step back, consider your options and reset your own boundaries about what's okay and what's not okay. Because sometimes we get caught in a spiral and it's hard to break it. So I'd step back and reevaluate what's important. And I think that helps you take back control as well. And once you're in this situation where you feel like you're spent and you're burnt out, you need to take back control as much as possible. Which in turn I think is about self-compassion at the end of the day. And we often find it easier to give advice to other people than we do to look at ourselves and help ourselves. But I think when it comes to self-compassion, it's about asking yourself, what would I say to a friend in this situation? And then trying to apply it to yourself. And I think at the end of the day, if you're giving all that you've got to give in a workplace scenario and it's still not enough, then there's probably not much choice than to move on and do something different. And the add-on to that, in terms of, from an employer perspective, we link it back to the Great Resignation or the big quit, then employers frankly need to get with the program, because burnout's real, reprioritizing is real, and there are strategies that we need to deploy and we can deploy to prevent a mass exodus and to attract and retain good people. And I think it's as simple as that at the end of the day from an employer point of view.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Emma. Really, really important takeaways there. So we're going to move on to the Q&A portion of today. We've had a couple that have come through already. We've just started going into the first question by Veronique, which I'll elaborate on now. So it was, how do you recover from burnout if the environment has been quite toxic, where you feel completely broken? Very powerful question. Thank you so much for asking us that, Veronique. First of all, would any of you like to share your thoughts on that?
Yes, I just wanted to say about what we need to really be very clear about the concept of burnout. In itself, I mean, that question has got both of the main ideas. Number one, the word toxic, and the other one, burnout. But let's go into the first one, the burnout. Burnout happens at any time if you're not careful. Burnout happens, especially with entrepreneurs, people who run businesses, or managers or directors, or anyone. But it happens when you lose sight of the inner world. That's how I see it. And then when you lose sight, you might not even notice that you've gone deep into it until it's too late and you become apathetic. Some people become apathetic. Some people just go completely opposite. They become too erratic. So it's like that sort of emotion, following motions. If that's the sign, in my experience, you got to realize that, hey, it's better to prevent it than really be into it. But so therefore, it could be many reasons why you burn out. Okay, but the problem is compounded when you are in a lockdown, and even more when you are in a toxic environment. So therefore, if you just peel the layers, so the first thing is burnout is about you. Okay, you're not good to anyone if you're not good to yourself. You're not of a value to anyone if you're not of value to yourself. So focusing within yourself by really calibrating, again, where you are, find your peace of mind. And again, I'm not a specialist in that. You got Valerie, you got Tanya, and got other people to really guide you through that. But my advice into that is find your place, and then as soon as possible, try to move away from the toxic environments. I can bring, Tanya knows this story. I can bring you a very personal story on how I literally realized that I was burning out because I was in a very, very toxic environment. I tried to change it. I tried to change myself, and I realized that the only way that I could actually do favor to people that I was helping, to people that were in that organization, was for me to move away from it. Obviously, I understand that there are situations where you cannot move from it, especially when you deal with families and relationships, but it starts with you. That's what I would say about this question.
Great. Thank you so much, Tomor. Maria, Emma, do you have anything to add to that?
I absolutely agree with Tomor. And I also want to add, so this brought to mind something that I read and heard a while ago. So there's a researcher turned entrepreneur. Her name is Dr. Jerry Puleo, and she has likened the symptoms of burnout to symptoms of PTSD. PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, where if you've burnt out because you've been in a toxic work environment for a long time, and you're just emotionally and mentally depleted, there might be some situations, as with PTSD, that you avoid. So work-related situations related to that sort of environment. And so I think sometimes thinking about burnout in that way as an instance of mild trauma could help. And so if you frame it in that way, then I think you can give yourself permission, first of all, to give yourself the time to recover. So if you've been able to pull out of that toxic work environment, like Tomer was saying, which would be ideal, then maybe take some time out and allow yourself to heal, and maybe find a different type of work to do if that is at all possible for you, something that is not necessarily 100% related to what you were doing before within that toxic environment. So that is something that might help based on the research that I have read, that I would be happy to share later if Tanya allows me to send her follow-up emails about this.
Of course, no problem. Kerry's just asked, actually, yeah, if you can name the researcher, but we're happy to share that in our post-event newsletter. So we always send a newsletter the day after our event, so we can add it in that as well. Thank you, Maria. Emma, anything that you'd like to add to that?
Nothing new, to be honest. I think everything's sort of been said from my point of view, but I'd love to hear from you, Tanya, because you must deal with this all the time as experts in your field. I'd love to hear your top tips on it.
Oh, thank you. Well, wanting to shine a light on you all primarily today, of course, but yeah, burnout is something we're incredibly passionate about. I really echo a lot of what Tomor and Maria have just said. There's so much value in taking a step back and giving yourself permission to take a step back, because, when we're coming from a place of fear and overwhelm and overstretched, it's very difficult for us cognitively in our brain to actually step into a space where we're making effective decisions and where we're actually able to figure out what we really need, because our brain, our body, our mind is completely in overwhelm. It's in a fight or flight state. It's in kind of survival mode. We're just trying to get by. And that place, it's very difficult to think logically, clearly, and understand and identify what we really need. So the first step really is around giving yourself that permission to take a step back from what's actually happening, and particularly if you feel you're in a toxic environment. And it hit me reading that you said you feel completely broken. Getting to that place, it should be a non-negotiable to take a step back from that. There's nothing more important than your health, because when you prioritize your health, that gets you in a much better place to be able to be at your best foot for anything else in your life. So that needs to be a priority. And what I'll do is I'll also share a blog link in the comments now to our blog, the 5 stages of burnout. It's our most highly visited blog that we have, and it identifies what all those symptoms are, and it gives you some resources at the bottom of that page as well, to help you, to understand what you can do to support yourself in recovery from burnout. But as what's been mentioned before about speaking to someone you trust, please don't go through this alone. We're not meant to live in an isolated way anyway. As human beings, we thrive on connecting with other human beings. It's a big part of what makes us human. So please do reach out to someone that you trust. And if you're not sure in your personal life, there are so many different modes of professional avenues that you can go down to have a confidential conversation with somebody. So thank you for that. And then we've got a few others here as well. So Claire has asked, which wellbeing interventions do you feel are most effective? Anyone care to share?
Well, I'll go. I think we've probably touched on them on an individual point of view a lot. But from a work point of view, in terms of, again, the big quit, I think it's about sort of training the whole workforce in awareness around wellbeing and showing that you're committed to it as an organization. We find one of the most effective things to do is to appoint wellbeing champions from all corners of the organization, not just managers, leaders, team leaders, that kind of thing, but make it accessible and real for everyone. Mental health first aid training through partners like yourself, Tanya, and resilience workshops can be so powerful to give people top tips in the workplace. And again, just have those holistic policies, one that covers everything: social, mental, physical and financial well-being. If you're going to do it well. And I would, we work with clients a lot to develop a 6 to 12 month content plan when it comes to well-being, so it's always at the fore and you've always got material to hand. It's really important to do pulse surveys with people, check in how you're doing. some of our clients that have this at the heart of what they do start every one-to-one with, tell me about life inside of work and outside of work, and everything else is secondary. So that's a really good way to keep it real and keep it accessible as well. But there's all sorts that can go into a good well-being strategy from a workplace point of view. And as for individuals, I think we've heard some great content today and some great ideas.
Thank you, Emma.
So from my side, yeah, I think we've already mentioned some of these strategies today. I have lots and lots of articles on medical news today, and my colleagues have also written lots of articles about strategies for well-being. I wouldn't say that there is a single strategy that would work for everybody, a single foolproof recipe, which is why I would advise people to go reading through, you know, some of these articles and just think about what might work for themselves, what kind of combination of strategies might work for themselves. It might be anything from seeing a therapist if they are able to, you know, doing yoga, looking after their physical health as much as possible, having a good night's sleep. But for me personally, I'd say what has helped me out the most is just having boundaries with people and situations if those people and situations were becoming unhelpful. Again, from my perspective as a journalist who has been covering the pandemic, just being able to say no to people has really helped, because it was getting to a point where family members and friends, knowing that I'm a health journalist, would turn to me for answers and advice constantly. And I had to learn to say no, and that's helped. So I'm a firm believer in drawing those boundaries where possible.
Wonderful. And just a couple of quick, we're running a little bit late, but Tomo, I'd love to hear if you have anything else to add to that. And then there's just one more question, and then we're going to bring Joe on from Outfly. Anything to add, Tomo?
I think all the previous speakers did mention a few concepts and ideas, and in fact, there's not only one magical key to sort these things out. Important is just to see things holistically, and but also go with a microscope into the individual issues. That's what I would ask.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And the last question from Claire was, how can we support line managers, HR leaders who probably feel just as overwhelmed and burnt out? Really great question, Claire. Important to recognize people of all different positions within companies. Anything any of you would like to share on that point? Yes, Tomo? Oh, you're on mute. Hold on.
I wanted to add something on this.
Mm-hmm.
This is really a very, very important question, actually, how to support leaders. Because quite often we talk about staff, employees, and people that we bring in, but line managers and leaders, being a leader, being a line manager is a very, very lonely place to be. Quite often, higher you go, less people around you would come in to support you. And that really does your head in, quite literally sometimes. So what could I give as tip in order to really support line managers and leaders is, number one, think egotistically about you. Think about them as humans. And that's the number one. Think about the loss you're going to have in terms of these people not effectively operating in their life. Because if they're not operating in their life 100%, then it's going to reflect into your business. And this brings me to the next point. Think about the benefits of the loss your business will have. If you have somebody who doesn't really operate 100% with all of their pistons running, then you're not going to have a team to really function properly, because the team are led by the leader. So therefore, what is the solution? One of the solutions, practically the fact that I'm in demand lately, as I told you, I've been traveling from Italy to Albania to Kosovo, is exactly this, that my clients are inviting me to start on two aspects. One, on leadership training, So the team, like a very small team, like 3, 4, 5 people working together to find their philosophy, go back into their core, but also taking care individually on them. And number 2, team building. Get somebody who's the most talented in your group, get somebody with great energy to really loosen people out. Most importantly is, yes, you can bring people into your building, but what I suggest, get out, go into a nice place. Even if you go to down road, if you can't afford it to buy, I'm not saying to get this luxurious hotel, but I'm just saying to go out and bring people in to really do some team building, something out of the blue, something to encourage people, to show perspective, to show that life is important. And that helps leaders, gives leaders that sort of energy, that boost of energy to manage their team. And especially for company leaders, for company managers. And what I'm saying is that from small companies, some middle management tiers up to the company CEOs, they need to start thinking strategically in terms of team building. Bring loads of physical stuff, bring loads of games into it, because we need to go back into our childhood. We need to go back into how we learned when we were kids. We learned by comparing, by competing sometimes, by winning together. So this is what I would give as a tip for managers and team leaders and leaders of companies.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tomor. Just really quickly, Emma, Maria, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
First of all, hats off to any HR professional and line manager who will be spinning multiple plates and probably leaving themselves to last right now. So all I would say to add to that is address the stress, lead by example, and try and put your own oxygen mask on first, because if we're worrying about everybody else before we look at ourselves, that's definitely what leads to burnout. And HR and line managers shouldn't be the forgotten people. So people around us need to recognise and reward that as well. We're too busy looking after other people to think about ourselves. So hopefully others in the organisation will recognise that.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you, Emma. Maria?
Well, Emma and Tomo have answered this question much better than I ever could. So the only thing that I'm going to add is two-way communication is important, always. It's important to be honest about where you're at and what's difficult for you as an employee, but also to ask that same question to your manager and see how they're coping and what they're dealing with, because having a better idea of what everybody is facing is essential to team building, to building that trust, and to having just a better understanding of where everybody's at and what we can help each other with, because everybody's definitely struggling with something.
Yeah.
I can say that for sure.
For sure. Thank you so much, Maria. Well, we're going to bring on Joe now from Outlive for the final few minutes of this presentation. But I just want to say a huge thank you to you all. Let's have a virtual round of applause for Tomor, for Maria, for Emma. You've all been absolute superstars, and it's been an absolute honor and pleasure and a privilege to spend the time with you all today. Thank you for giving such wonderful insights. And I'll share information, including the links that Maria just kindly sent in the chat box to some great medical news day articles. And I'll send information about how you can get in touch with these wonderful people and stay connected with them and all the great work they're doing. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to invite the wonderful Joe Kaplan from Outfly onto the call with me now, and we're going to have a brief chat about managing mental health in the startup community. So, hello, Joe.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you see me?
I can hear you and I can see you. Woohoo! Double tick.
Brilliant.
How are you doing today?
Working. I'm really well. Thank you for asking. How are you?
Pleasure. Yeah, good. Thank you. It's great to have you join us. Thank you for making the time today.
That's all right. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So just to give a bit of context to everyone else who who is here with us today. So Outfly are a design innovation agency based in London. They're passionate about supporting founders and startups on their business journey. They're an integrated agency that works flexibly for those who need most growth, specializing in building long-term relationships with people they believe in. The Outfly team are also dedicated to raising awareness of the impact of mental health for entrepreneurs. And Joe here today is the head of strategy at Outfly, and we've collaborated in a couple of ways, Karma and Outfly in recent months, Mental Health Awareness Week, did a little social media campaign, and this time Joe has kindly led a guest blog for us during this very important date on the mental health calendar, highlighting how startup founders are managing burnout and how they recover and overcome it. So thank you for being here, Joe, today, and for writing that wonderful blog for us, which we'll share in the newsletter tomorrow. So can you give us a little bit of context? I'd love to hear your perspective live in terms of burnout, sort of what your idea and understanding of that is from personal experience, and the importance of managing mental health within the startup community.
Absolutely. I was trying to write something during that discussion, which again, thank you everyone. It was sort of so insightful, and I kept on trying to add something, deep and wrapping up at the end, and then having to delete it because someone else said something brilliant that I wanted to try and reference. So, just thank you all so much. As Tanya said, look, we've been collaborating with Karma for a little while, trying to bring some design to this issue because it's something that's important to, well, frankly, me personally, mental health and burnout, but also to us as an agency. I know that everyone attending this call, every panelist knows someone who has either let it go too far or who has at the very least experienced burnout, and so we're aware of the importance of the issue. As an agency, it's important to us because being in an agency is stressful. Being in an agency that works specifically with founders, and Tomo, you will know this, is incredibly stressful because they have the loneliness of being the leader, the uncertainty of having to try and clarify their vision, and the responsibility of trying to look after their team and make it work, all the while trying to convince other people to believe in them. And one of the things that has helped us as agency employees to manage our own stress levels, and that we know has helped the founders in our network to manage theirs, is clarity. It's clarity of vision, clarity of position, which later becomes delegation and passion. Essentially, it's what are you doing? Why are you doing it? And why does it matter? It's why we've had less of an issue with burnout here than I've seen at other agencies and that other people have, because we spend a long time helping startups to answer that question, mainly, honestly, for investment. It's something that you need to clarify when you're a startup, but as companies grow, it's something they often lose sight of. What are we doing? We're all real people here working together. What are we trying to achieve? Because we spend so long helping startups to clarify that, it's something that we clarify internally. And so everyone from our UX designer, who's opposite me right there, to our copywriter, knows how their piece of the puzzle connects with the overall goal, and it helps hugely to eliminate that sense of abstract stress. There's a really simplistic sort of Simon Sinek quote that you guys will be aware of, that working hard for something we don't care about is called stress, working hard for something we love is called passion, but passion needs that clarity. Again, as a startup, you're encouraged to build that clarity of vision because it helps someone else invest into you, someone else buy into you. But as a growing organization, the people you really need to buy into you are yourself and your team as a founder. If you have a North Star, it is so much easier to understand the value of the work you're doing. And then I think precisely as you said, Tanya, to be yourself. It's that Oscar Wilde quote, which I absolutely love. Be yourself, everyone else has already taken. It's so much easier to be yourself if you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And it's so easy to learn. There's one more quote that I also like, which is the one from Alain de Botton. There's no such thing as work-life balance. Everything worth fighting for unbalances your life. In the work-life week, saying that or thinking about that could seem hypocritical, but it's not. I don't think there's anything wrong with being busy. Each of us are busy if we find something that we love or find something we're passionate. The problem comes when you don't understand or you don't see the value of it. And we've spoken about this in different guises. If people aren't respected or thanked or given value from a top-down perspective, if as a founder you don't understand the the vision and clarity that you have. And I think that that's one of the reasons that we have the Great Resignation movement. It's that people are looking for that. They're looking for purpose. They're looking for clarity, and those in purpose-driven organizations, as well as giving things like flexible working, those people who understand what they're doing and believe that what they're doing is valuable aren't leaving so much. The other thing that is helping to, I think, combat the effects of burnout that have been decreasing in large organizations are the universalization of the startup mentality, everything I've been talking about. People understand the importance of staying as a startup. We also have the growth of emotional awareness, the acceptance of the sort of whole person mentality and the ripping off of that corporate mask. But that is thanks to, frankly, people like Tanya, people like all of our panelists and the work that people like Karma do. So I think all of these things coming together can help to stop work being seen as a horrible part of life that you need to force balance over. I think if we can help people, more people at least, turn their work into passions, into forming and identifying and clarifying visions, then we'll go a long way towards helping that. But yeah, so again, I think just thank you, Karma, and for another wonderful event.
Pleasure. Thank you so much, Joe. And, really beautifully articulated. And on that note, you are very much a wordsmith as well. Like, we really loved reading the guest blog that you kindly wrote for us, sharing some case study stories from your startup community. And that actually really struck a chord with me, what you've just referenced there, when the part of the blog where you were talking about employee benefits and how important it is to your work and home lives, to blend with that. And, that cultural shift towards vocational whole person working styles is just really beautifully written. So thank you again. And please just tell everyone a little bit more about how Outfly work with startups, because it's a very unique way that you operate in how you support startup ventures.
Sure. So I think that part of our model comes from our belief that starting with brand, starting with vision is the most efficient way to do anything. Most people get an MVP and then figure out a website and then work backwards towards their brand when they can afford it. We, having worked in bigger agencies, saw the inefficiency in that, in having to redo everything, once you've gotten funding. And so started working with startups, or trying to work with startups earlier and earlier and earlier, to help them do that right the first time, to help them compete with bigger people without needing to go through inefficiencies, essentially just to help innovators innovate. The way we've ended up doing that ourselves is to partner with them long term from the start. So we don't take upfront fees. We instead figure out how much work we're going to need to do over a given time frame and bill out everything over the course of that, very often doing equity partnerships with our startups, which is why the clarity of their vision needs to be really, really clear to us, because it's a risk, and it's a risk that everyone on the team takes. Again, I think that those concepts of purpose, vision, and brand are so intertwined and so important in getting other people to buy into your vision, whether that be an agency like ours, investors, or your team members. That not starting with that, not doing the work to clarify that first off is a false economy. The way that I ended up working here was I hired the different iteration of the agency a couple of years ago with my startup, which was doing sort of mental health in large organizations, and being on the receiving end of that brand process clarified our vision so much and helped us realize, okay, well, are we working for the organizations or the employees? Are we about data or empowerment or self-awareness? That process sped up what we were doing by years, and it's difficult. But again, not doing that work up front is a false economy, and that's kind of our fundamental core belief as an agency.
Wonderful. It's so inspiring. You're doing brilliant work, and keep doing what you're doing. How can people get in touch with you to find out more about Outfly?
You can get in contact with me at joe@outfly.io, or you can go to the website outfly.io. We should have it linked somewhere in the blog, which please do check that out in the newsletter, because it was a lot of fun to write. And it mentions a couple of the companies that we've worked with who we're just always proud of. I'll share it on LinkedIn as well. I think you guys can feel free to add me. And I'll be sharing, not only the blog and my thoughts, but also, those founders that I've spoken about, because they're all doing really cool, exciting things, and they're quite inspiring people themselves.
Wonderful. Yeah, definitely worth a read. And thank you so much to you and the Outfly team, as always, for all your support. Very much
No
appreciated.
worries. Thank you.
So have a wonderful day, Joe. Thank you.
You too.
So that wraps up everything. We've now come to the end of our event. I've just seen another few comments in here. People tuning in from Australia, New York, Florida, Kuala Lumpur, London, from all over today, which is just absolutely phenomenal. Thank you, everyone, for all your lovely comments and for your engagement, for your questions today. It's been an absolute pleasure to connect with you all, to spend time with you all. Please do stay connected with Karma. We'd love to keep engaging with you moving forward. We run these events monthly. Sometimes we'll shift the date and time that we do depending on whether there's a really core awareness date in the year, like today, and this time in the month. Usually we do it the last Monday of every month as our monthly mindfulness workshop, and we'll cover a different theme, something very topical and timely. And occasionally we might shift that date to accommodate a special awareness raising time in the year. So you can sign up to our newsletter to receive regular updates. We have lots of information on our website, from what we offer to our blogs to our podcasts. So please do visit thisiskarma.com for further information. And it's been an absolute joy and a pleasure to be here with you all today. I hope you've taken away lots of insights, some practical strategies, tools, ideas, insights to look after yourself as well as others around you. So thank you so much, everybody. Take good care of yourselves, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon. Bye.